The 4-pump beeped steadily beside my bed as I stared at my phone screen, certain the sepsis had finally reached my brain. I had been fighting for my life for 6 days. My fever had broken just 2 hours ago. My husband Edward had left to handle some business 3 hours ago. And now I was looking at an insurance notification that made no sense. Coverage terminated. Policy cancelled by primary holder. Effective immediately. I blinked. Refreshed the screen. The words didn't change. My fingers trembled as I tried to understand what I was reading. Our health insurance, the policy Edward had through his company, the one that was keeping me alive right now, showed as cancelled. I called Edward. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Panic started creeping up my chest as I tried to log into our joint bank account. Access denied. I attempted our credit cards. Every single one, account closed. Access revoked. The antibiotics dripped into my veins through the 4 in my arm. The doctors had said I needed at least 2 more weeks of this treatment. 2 more weeks to make sure the infection didn't come back and kill me. And now I was staring at a phone screen telling me I had no way to pay for it. I called Edward 23 more times over the next hour. Each call went straight to voicemail. I texted him dozens of messages, each one more desperate than the last. Where are you? Edward, please call me. Something is wrong with our insurance. Edward, I'm scared. Please answer. The hospital is asking about payment. Call me now. Nothing. Complete silence. A nurse came in to check my vitals. She noticed my red eyes and asked if I was okay. I lied and said the antibiotics were making me emotional. She nodded sympathetically and left. She had no idea. The hospital administrator appeared in my doorway around 8 p.m. She had that look on her face, the one I had seen her give to other patients. The look that said, "You can't afford to be here. Ms. Riley, we need to discuss your payment options." I could barely speak. My husband, he handles the insurance. There must be some mistake. She glanced at her tablet. According to our records, your coverage was terminated this morning by the primary policy holder. Your current balance is $180,000, and without active insurance, we'll need to arrange. This morning? I interrupted. But I've been unconscious. I had a fever of 104 degrees this morning. She shifted uncomfortably. The cancellation was processed at 9:47 a.m. 9:47 a.m. I had been delirious, the doctors had been worried my organs were shutting down, and my husband had cancelled my health insurance. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that notification. Coverage terminated. And every time the 4-pump beeped, signaling another dose of the antibiotics keeping me alive, I wondered how I was going to pay for treatment with zero insurance and zero access to money. The next morning, a text finally came through, but it wasn't from Edward. It was from a number I didn't recognize. He doesn't love you. He never did. Stop being pathetic and let him go. My blood ran cold. I stared at the message for a long time before my shaking fingers could type back. Who is this? The response came quickly. Someone who actually makes him happy. Something you never could. Then another message appeared. This one had an attachment. I clicked on it with trembling hands, already knowing it would destroy me, but unable to stop myself. It was a photo of Edward. My Edward, the man I had married, the man who had held me through my mother's death, the man who had promised in sickness and in health. He was on a yacht with Verta Robinson, his business consultant. The woman he had assured me was just a colleague when I expressed concern about their constant meetings. The woman he had defended when I mentioned she seemed too interested in our personal life. She was wearing a diamond necklace that caught the sunlight like fire. Even through my fever-addled brain, I could tell it was expensive. Very expensive. Another photo came through. A Cartier receipt. I had to blink several times to make sure I was reading it correctly. $47,000. Date, yesterday. Time, 2:34 p.m. Yesterday. While I had been in the ICU with a fever of 104, while the doctors had been discussing whether to move me to intensive care, while I had been fighting sepsis 3 miles away from that Cartier store, my husband had been buying his mistress a $47,000 diamond necklace. I did the math even though my brain felt like it was moving through mud. Our monthly insurance premium was $1,847. He could have kept me covered for 2 years with that money. He chose jewelry for her instead. The final message came through. He's done pretending to care about you. The insurance money is funding my life now. Our life. Just die already so we don't have to wait. I turned off my phone. I couldn't look at it anymore. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I looked down at the 4 in my arm, at the antibiotics keeping me alive, and understood with perfect, terrible clarity, my husband was trying to kill me. Not with violence. Not with his hands. With abandonment. With financial starvation. With calculated cruelty timed to the moment when I was most vulnerable. The hospital room felt smaller suddenly. The walls seemed to close in. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of building something together. 5 years of trusting someone completely. And he had been planning this, waiting for me to be weak enough, sick enough, desperate enough. I held my hand against my chest, feeling my heart beat. Still alive. Still fighting. But there was something Edward and his mistress didn't know. Something that would change everything. Yesterday, before the fever had gotten so bad I couldn't think straight, a letter had arrived at the hospital. Forwarded from our old address. From a law firm I didn't recognize. Henderson and Associates Estate Law. Regarding Josephine Marie Riley, deceased. I hadn't opened it yet. I had assumed it was junk mail, or a mistake. My grandmother Josephine had abandoned our family when I was 8 years old. We hadn't spoken in over 20 years. When she died 2 weeks ago, I hadn't even known until I saw a brief obituary online. But now, with my phone dark and silent, with my husband's betrayal burning through my veins like poison, with Verda's words echoing in my head, just die already, I reached for that letter with shaking hands. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a final insult from a woman who had never loved us. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the thing that would save my life. Either way, Edward had made one fatal mistake. He had assumed I would die quietly. The letter from Henderson and Associates lay unopened on my bedside table as Dr. Okonkwo entered for morning rounds. I had barely slept, the insurance notification still glowing behind my closed eyelids every time I tried to rest. "Angelina," Dr. Okonkwo said warmly, checking the monitors. "Your fever broke overnight. That's excellent news." She pulled up my chart on her tablet, scrolling through the data. "Your white blood cell count is coming down, but you're not out of the woods yet. We're looking at a minimum of 2 more weeks of 4 antibiotics. Sepsis is serious business. We need to make absolutely sure this infection is completely cleared before we even think about discharge. 2 more weeks. 14 more days of 4 antibiotics at God knows how much per bag." I felt my chest tighten. "Dr. Okonkwo," I said quietly, "there's been a problem with my insurance." She looked up from the tablet, concern crossing her face. "What kind of problem?" "It's been cancelled. As of yesterday morning." Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Cancelled? During active treatment?" She caught herself, professional mask sliding back into place. "Let me have someone from billing come speak with you. There must be some mistake." But we both knew there wasn't a mistake. She left, and I was alone again with the steady drip of the 4 and the crushing weight of what Edward had done. I picked up my phone with trembling hands and tried our joint account one more time. Maybe I had been delirious last night. Maybe the fever had made me see things that weren't there. "Access denied. Account holder has revoked your authorization." The words were just as real in the morning light. I called Edward again. Voicemail. I called his office. His assistant Marcy answered on the 3rd ring. "Henderson Consulting, this is." "Marcy, It's Angelina. I need to speak to Edward. It's an emergency. A pause. A long, uncomfortable pause. I'm sorry, Angelina. Mr. Henderson left instructions that he's not to be disturbed. Marcy, I'm in the hospital. There's been a problem with our insurance and our bank accounts. I really can't help you. Her voice had gone cold, professional. You'll need to work that out with him directly. She hung up. I stared at the phone. Marcy had been to our house for dinner. She had sent me a care package when I was first admitted to the hospital. And now she was shutting me out like I was a stranger making harassing calls. What had Edward told them? My phone buzzed. For one desperate moment, I thought it was Edward finally calling back. But it was another text from the unknown number. Still bothering him? Pathetic. Then another photo loaded. This one was from inside a restaurant I recognized, Masala, the upscale Indian place Edward always said was too expensive for a regular Tuesday. Verda sat across from him, laughing, her hand on his. The diamond necklace sparkled at her throat even in the dim restaurant lighting. The timestamp, last night. 8:47 p.m. While I had been lying here processing the fact that my husband had cancelled my insurance, while I had been trying to reach him 23 times in growing panic, he had been at an expensive restaurant with his mistress, celebrating what he'd done. Another photo appeared. A selfie of Verda and Edward. She was kissing his cheek. He was smiling, actually smiling, wider than I'd seen him smile in months. The caption she'd added, finally free to be happy. My hand started shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. A knock at the door. A woman in a gray pantsuit entered, tablet in hand, expression carefully neutral. Ms. Riley? I'm Janet Kemp from Patient Financial Services. I understand there's been a change in your insurance status. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. She sat in the chair beside my bed, the same chair Edward had sat in 6 days ago when they first admitted me, back when I still believed he loved me. According to our records, your insurance policy was terminated yesterday at 9:47 a.m. We've submitted claims for your treatment so far, but they're being rejected due to the cancellation falling within the active treatment period. Your current balance is $180,347. And with the projected 2 additional weeks of treatment Dr. Okonkwo is recommending, we're estimating a total of approximately $340,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $340,000. Sepsis treatment is extremely expensive, Janet said, not unkindly. The 4 antibiotics alone are $3,200 per day. ICU monitoring, labs, imaging, physician fees, it all adds up quickly. Do you have any other insurance coverage? Through your own employer perhaps? I'm on medical leave. My company's insurance doesn't start until you've been there a year. I've only been there 8 months. My voice sounded hollow, distant. The plan was to stay on my husband's insurance until then. I see. Janet made a note on her tablet. And Mr. Henderson, has he indicated why the policy was cancelled? He won't answer my calls. Another note. The sympathy in her eyes was worse than judgment would have been. Ms. Riley, I need to be frank with you. Without insurance or a payment plan, we can't continue treatment beyond what's medically necessary to stabilize you. If you're stable enough to be discharged, we'll have to. The doctor just said I need 2 more weeks of 4 antibiotics. We'll do what we can, Janet said carefully. But I need you to understand the situation. We're required to stabilize you, but we're not required to provide extended non-emergency care without payment arrangements. So you're saying you'll discharge me even though I could die without continued treatment? Janet's silence was answer enough. After she left, I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the water stains. 12 brown stains from old leaks that had never been properly fixed. I focused on them because if I focused on anything else, I would start screaming and never stop. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Verda's number. He told me about your joint account. About the $89,000 you had saved together. Well, had Past tense. He transferred it to our account yesterday. Every penny. Thank you for funding our future. Then a screenshot of a bank account. Edward's name at the top. And mine was crossed out, replaced with, Verda Robinson, joint account holder. Balance, $89,000. Our emergency fund. The money we'd saved for a down payment on a house. For starting a family. For emergencies exactly like this one. Gone. And not just gone, given to her. She was now authorized on his account. I had been erased and replaced in less than 24 hours. Another text, he said you were always so boring with money. Save, save, save. Thank God he found someone who knows how to actually live. A photo, shopping bags from Neiman Marcus, Gucci, Prada. All dated yesterday. All charged to what used to be our joint credit card. I tried to call Edward again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I called 15 more times, each call going straight to voicemail, each beep of rejection feeling like another nail in my coffin. Then, finally, on the 29th call, he answered. What, Angelina? His voice was cold. Not angry, not apologetic, not even annoyed. Just cold. Like I was a telemarketer who had caught him at a bad time. Edward. My voice cracked. What's happening? The insurance, the accounts, I don't understand. I'm done. Done. What does that mean? I'm in the hospital. I'm sick. I know what you need. You always need something. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of you. The words felt unreal, like they were coming from a stranger who'd stolen my husband's voice. Edward, I have sepsis. The doctors say. I don't care what the doctors say. I'm not paying for this anymore. You'll find a way to manage. You always do. Manage? I have $180,000 in medical bills. You canceled my insurance while I was unconscious. It's my insurance. I can cancel it whenever I want. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Our bank accounts. My money. I earned it. You can't work right now, remember? So technically, you haven't contributed anything in months. I've been sick. Exactly. You've been sick for months. It's exhausting, Angelina. Constantly worrying about you, constantly dealing with your health problems. Verda made me realize I don't have to live like this. There it was. Her name. Out in the open. So it's true. You're having an affair. I'm in love. He said it simply, like it was a fact as basic as the weather. I should have ended things with you months ago, but I was trying to be nice. That was clearly a mistake. Nice? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You canceled my health insurance while I'm fighting sepsis. You took all our money. You changed the locks on our house. How did you? He stopped himself. The house is in my name. The accounts are in my name. Legally, it's all mine. The lawyer said so. You've already talked to a lawyer. I filed for divorce this morning. You should be getting the papers soon. Sign them. Don't fight this. Just, let me go. If you ever loved me, you'll let me go. The manipulation was so blatant, so calculated, I almost laughed. If I ever loved you. Edward, I'm in a hospital bed with an 4 in my arm because my body tried to kill itself with infection, and you're asking me to prove my love by giving you a free divorce. See, this is what I mean. Everything is so dramatic with you. So negative. Verda is positive. She's fun. She makes me feel alive. I'm sure your money makes her feel alive too. Fuck you, Angelina. The venom in his voice was shocking. I'd heard him angry before, but never like this. Never directed at me with such pure hatred. The papers will be delivered to the hospital, he continued, his voice returning to that awful coldness. Sign them. Don't try to fight for anything. You won't win. And if you make this difficult, I'll make sure you don't get a single penny. I'll tie everything up in court for years. You can't afford that. Literally. Edward. I'm not paying for this. Not the medical bills, not your living expenses, nothing. Figure it out yourself. That's what adults do. I could die. Silence. Long, terrible silence. Then, that's not my problem anymore. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the screen showing the ended call. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. That's how long it took for my husband of 5 years to tell me he'd rather I die than cost him any more money. The 4-pump beeped, signaling another bag of antibiotics, $3, $200 worth of medication I had no way to pay for. The monitors showed my heart rate elevated, blood pressure spiking. The stress was literally registering on the machines. A nurse poked her head in. Everything okay in here? Your vitals. I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. She looked skeptical but nodded and left. I wasn't fine. I was the opposite of fine. I was lying in a hospital bed with $180,000 in debt and climbing, no insurance, no access to money, a husband who wanted me dead, and a mistress who was actively spending the money that should have been keeping me alive. My phone buzzed. Another text from Verda. He's here with me right now. We're picking out furniture for our house. The one you'll never see. I told him to just wait for you to die, but he said divorce would be faster. Either way works for me. A photo, Edward and Verda at what looked like a high-end furniture store. His arm around her waist. Both smiling. Then another message, by the way, I'm wearing your perfume. The Chanel one you kept in his bathroom. He says it smells better on me. Everything's better on me. I turned off my phone. The sun was setting outside my window. Day 6 was ending. Day 7 was beginning. The infection in my body was being held at bay by antibiotics I couldn't afford. My husband was furniture shopping with his mistress using money that should have been saving my life. And somewhere in my pile of mail, unopened, was a letter from a grandmother I hadn't spoken to in 23 years. I reached for it with shaking hands. The fever was coming back. I could feel it building, the familiar heat starting to creep through my body. My temperature was spiking again. The infection wasn't gone. It was just waiting. Like Edward had been waiting. Waiting for me to be weak enough. Sick enough. Desperate enough. Waiting for me to die. But I didn't open the letter. Not yet. Instead, I pressed the call button for the nurse. I need Dr. Okonkwo, I said when she appeared. I need to know exactly what happens if I can't pay for treatment. I need to know how long I have. The nurse's face fell. Ms. Riley. Please. I need to know the truth. She hesitated, then nodded. I'll get the doctor. While I waited, I looked at the letter again. The return address, Henderson and Associates Estate Law. My grandmother's name, Josephine Marie Riley. The woman who had abandoned us. The woman who had left when I was 8 years old and never looked back. The woman who, according to the internet obituary I'd found last week, had died 2 weeks ago at age 82. Whatever was in that letter, it wouldn't save me. A dead woman's words couldn't pay $180,000 in medical bills. They couldn't restore my canceled insurance. They couldn't make my husband love me again or make my body fight off an infection that was currently winning. But maybe, just maybe, they could give me something to hold on to besides rage and despair. Dr. Okonkwo entered, her expression grave. Tell me the truth, I said before she could speak. If I can't pay, what happens? She sat in the chair, the same chair Janet had occupied earlier, the same chair Edward had sat in when he still pretended to care. We'll stabilize you, she said quietly. We'll continue antibiotics until you're stable enough for discharge. That might be 3 more days, maybe 4. Then we'll discharge you with oral antibiotics and instructions for outpatient follow-up. And if the oral antibiotics don't work? If the infection comes back? Then you'll need to come back to the emergency room. Where I'll rack up more bills I can't pay. She didn't deny it. What are my chances? I asked. With only 3 or 4 more days of 4 antibiotics instead of 2 weeks. Dr. Okonkwo's face told me everything before she spoke. Sepsis is unpredictable. With a full course of treatment, your chances of full recovery are about 90%. With an abbreviated course and transitioning to oral antibiotics while the infection is still active. She paused. 50-50. Maybe 60-40 if you're lucky. 50-50. A coin flip. Heads I live. Tails I die. And all because my husband wanted to buy his mistress a diamond necklace. Thank you, I said. For being honest. After she left, I finally opened the letter. Inside was a business card for Christopher Henderson, attorney at law, and a brief note in neat handwriting. Ms. Riley. I represent the estate of Josephine Marie Riley, deceased. You are named as a beneficiary in her will. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience to discuss the details of your inheritance. My condolences on your loss. Sincerely, Christopher Henderson, Esq. I read it 3 times. Beneficiary. Inheritance. It was probably nothing. Maybe grandmother's old furniture. Maybe a few $100s. Dead people's estates always sounded more impressive than they were. But it was something. Some small thread connecting me to a past I barely remembered, to a woman who had left us but who, apparently, had remembered me in the end. I tucked the card under my pillow. Outside my window, the sun had fully set. Night had come. Day 6 was over. I had 3, maybe 4 days left in this hospital. 3 or 4 more days of treatment that might or might not save my life. Then I'd be discharged with nowhere to go, no money, no insurance, and a 50-50 chance of surviving. Edward thought I'd die quietly. Give up. Sign his papers and fade away. Verda thought I was pathetic. Weak. Already defeated. They didn't know that Riley women don't die quietly. Even if I didn't remember my grandmother's face, I remembered her voice. Strong. Certain. Unbreakable. I just didn't know yet if I had inherited that strength. The fever climbed higher through the night. The nurses came and went, adjusting medications, monitoring vitals, offering water and cool cloths. But I barely noticed them. I was too busy making calculations. 3 or 4 days of treatment. Then discharge. Then what? My sister Maya, could she take me in? Her tiny 1-bedroom apartment barely fit her and her cat. But she would try. She always tried. My friend Keisha, she'd offered help when I first got sick. But she had 3 kids and a husband who'd just lost his job. I couldn't burden her. No family money. No savings I could access. No credit cards that weren't cancelled. Just a letter from a dead grandmother and a 50-50 chance. The 4 dripped. The monitors beeped. The fever burned. And somewhere in the city, my husband and his mistress slept peacefully in our bed, wearing my perfume, spending my money, waiting for me to die. They would be waiting a long time. I might only have a 50-50 chance of survival. But that was still a chance. And I intended to take it. Janet from Patient Financial Services returned on day 9. My fever was still hovering at 102. The infection was fighting back against the antibiotics, and Dr. Okonkwo's face had grown more concerned with each morning round. But Janet's expression held no medical concern, only administrative finality. Ms. Riley, we've exhausted all options. Without payment arrangements, we need to discharge you today. Today. My voice came out as a croak. I'm still sick. The fever won't break. You're stable enough for outpatient care. We'll send you home with prescriptions and discharge instructions. Home. The word felt like a cruel joke. Maya arrived 2 hours later, her face crumpling when she saw me. My little sister, always so put together, looked like she'd aged 5 years in the week since I'd been admitted. She threw her arms around me carefully, avoiding the foresight. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea Edward was, I can't believe he. How much do you have? I asked, cutting through the emotion. I didn't have energy for tears. Maya pulled out her phone, showing me her savings account. $8,347. Her emergency fund. The money she'd been saving for a new car because hers was dying. Take it, she said. All of it. It wasn't enough. It wasn't close to enough. But it was something. The discharge nurse handed me papers to sign and 2 prescriptions. Oral antibiotics. Less effective than 4, Dr. Okonkwo had explained apologetically, but better than nothing. The pharmacy estimate, $1,200 for the 2-week supply. Maya's face went pale. I don't have, after the hospital payment. I know. I folded the prescriptions and tucked them in my pocket. Maybe I could find a charity pharmacy. Maybe I could split the pills, make them last longer. Maybe I would just get lucky and my body would fight off what was left of the infection without them. 50-50 odds, I reminded myself. A coin flip. Maya's apartment was exactly as I remembered, small, tidy, barely big enough for 1 person let alone 2. She'd cleared the couch for me, stacked her textbooks on the floor, pushed the coffee table against the wall to make room. It felt like being buried alive in someone else's life. I collapsed on the couch, too weak to even sit up properly. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Keisha. I called her back. Girl, where are you? Maya said they discharged you already. I'm at Maya's. No insurance, no money, no choice. Keisha's silence spoke volumes. Then, I can bring you some food. Soup, maybe. What do you need? To go back in time and not marry Edward. She didn't laugh. I tried to tell you about him. Remember? When you first started dating? I did remember. Keisha had pulled me aside at a party, told me Edward had a reputation. Too smooth. Too calculating. The way he talked about his ex-girlfriend, like she was an inconvenience he'd finally handled. But I'd been in love. Or what I'd thought was love. You said his comments about her being high maintenance were a red flag, I whispered. And then he started saying the same things about you when you got sick. Called your doctor's appointments inconvenient. Said your medications were too expensive. Got real friendly with Verda right around the same time. I'd ignored it all. Explained it away. Made excuses. Convinced myself I was being paranoid. I need to get my things from the house, I said, changing the subject because I couldn't bear to hear more truth. Angelina, you can barely stand. I need my documents. My birth certificate, my passport, my mother's jewelry. The photo albums. The wedding dress I'd stupidly thought I might pass down to a daughter someday. Maya drove us there an hour later. I slept the entire ride, waking only when she parked in front of what used to be my home. The house Edward's parents had helped us buy, the house that was in his name alone because his credit score was better and I trusted him. The first thing I saw were the trash bags. 7 black garbage bags lined up on the lawn like body bags. My belongings, thrown away like garbage. Oh my God, Maya breathed. I climbed out of the car, my legs shaking, and walked toward the bags. Neighbors were watching. Mrs. Chen from next door stood on her porch with her arms crossed. Mr. Patterson slowed his lawn mower. The teenage girl from across the street openly filmed on her phone. I opened the first bag. Clothes. My winter coats, my work blazers, all crammed in without care. The second bag, shoes, books, framed photos with the glass cracked. The third bag. My wedding dress. The white silk was stained with something dark, coffee maybe, or mud. The beading my mother had spent hours admiring was crushed, broken, scattered in the bottom of the bag like fallen teeth. I sank to my knees on the grass, the fever making everything swim. He said you were too sick to be a real wife. Mrs. Chen's voice cut across the lawn. Said you'd become a burden. Said he deserved better. I looked up at her. She didn't look away. You knew, I said. You knew about Verda. Everyone knew, honey. She's been coming and going for months. The casual cruelty of it, that my neighbors had watched my husband's affair unfold, had said nothing, had judged me instead of him. Maya was pulling bags toward the car, her face furious. We're taking everything. Come on, on. I tried to stand. My legs wouldn't support me. The world tilted sideways. Angelina. Maya's voice, far away. Hands catching me before I hit the ground. The sky above, gray and heavy, promising rain. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was my wedding dress, crushed and stained, spilling out of the trash bag onto the lawn where I'd once imagined my children playing. The fever came back on day 12. I woke on Maya's couch drenched in sweat, my temperature climbing to 101.8. The oral antibiotics weren't working. Or maybe I hadn't taken them consistently enough, rationing them because Maya and Keisha had only managed to scrape together $400 for a partial prescription. 7 days of pills instead of 14. Better than nothing, the pharmacist had said with pity in her eyes. The knock on Maya's door came that afternoon. I was lying on the couch in borrowed pajamas, Maya's, 2 sizes too big, trying to keep down water. Maya opened the door to find a man in a cheap suit holding a clipboard. Angelina Riley. That's my sister. Who's asking? Process server. I need her signature. Maya took the papers with shaking hands and closed the door. She stood there reading for a long moment, her face going pale, then red, then pale again. That bastard, she whispered. The divorce petition was 19 pages long. I couldn't focus on most of it, the fever made the word swim, but certain phrases stood out like knife wounds. Petitioner requests dissolution of marriage with no spousal support. Respondent abandoned the marital home and responsibilities. Petitioner requests respondent waive all claims to community property. Respondent's medical expenses are her sole responsibility. I read that last line 3 times. My medical expenses. The $180,000 in debt his insurance cancellation had caused. My sole responsibility. He's claiming you abandoned him, Maya said, her voice shaking with rage. He's saying you abandoned the marriage by getting sick. By going to the hospital. The legal aid attorney I met with 2 days later was named Tom Chen. He had 15 minutes between appointments and an office that smelled like old coffee and defeat. Insurance fraud is nearly impossible to prove, he said after scanning the papers. Especially when it's a spouse canceling coverage on a joint policy. Technically, he had the legal right. The legal right to try to kill me? Tom's face softened. I understand how it feels. But from a legal standpoint, the policy was in his name through his employer. You were a dependent. He can remove dependents at will. Even while I was unconscious with sepsis. Even then. He flipped through the papers. The house is solely in his name. The joint account, he had equal access, which means legally he could withdraw everything. The medical debt is in your name because you were the patient when the insurance was cancelled. Your credit is already ruined by the unpaid bills. He looked up at me. Ms. Riley, I'm going to be honest with you. You don't have a case. At least not one you can afford to fight. I sat in the plastic chair of his cramped office, wearing Maya's borrowed coat, running a fever, and felt something inside me crack. So he just gets away with it. I'm sorry. The emergency Medicaid application took 3 hours at a county office that reeked of bleach and desperation. I filled out forms asking about every asset I'd ever owned, every dollar I'd ever earned, every possession I had left. The caseworker, a tired woman named Brenda, barely looked at me as she stamped papers. You'll hear back in 4 to 6 weeks, she said. If approved. I might not have 4 to 6 weeks. She'd heard that before. Her expression didn't change. Back at Maya's apartment, Keisha was waiting with groceries she'd paid for with money she didn't have. Maya was sorting through her closet, pulling out clothes I could borrow for the inevitable job interviews I was too sick to attend. They were pooling money for my basic needs while their own bills went unpaid. My phone rang. Edward's lawyer. I'd ignored 4 previous calls. Ms. Riley, I'm calling on behalf of my client to encourage you to review the divorce papers. They're quite generous considering the circumstances. Generous? My voice came out as a rasp. Mr. Henderson is willing to waive any claims for reimbursement of marital funds spent on your medical care before the separation. He's simply asking that you sign away any future claims and allow both parties to move forward. He wants me to sign away rights to a house I helped pay for, savings I helped build, and take on $180,000 in medical debt he caused. Mr. Henderson's position is that continuing to fight will only increase legal costs neither party can afford. It would be easier for everyone if you just signed and moved on. Easier. For everyone. Meaning easier for Edward to marry Verda without the messy complication of a wife who refused to die on schedule. I hung up. That night, lying on Maya's couch, listening to her gentle snoring from the bedroom, I had the thought for the first time, maybe dying would be easier. Easier than fighting a legal system designed to protect men like Edward. Easier than living in borrowed clothes in my little sister's apartment. Easier than watching my credit score plummet and my body deteriorate and my future dissolve into medical debt I could never repay. Maybe Edward had done me a favor. Maybe this was mercy. But then I thought of Verda's texts. Just die already so we don't have to wait. I thought of Edward's cold voice. That's not my problem anymore. I thought of the wedding dress in the garbage and Mrs. Chen's pitying face and the lawyer's casual dismissal of attempted murder as technically legal. And somewhere deep in the fever and exhaustion and despair, something sparked. Small. Fragile. But defiant. They wanted me to die quietly. Sign the papers. Disappear. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Not yet. The second letter from Henderson and Associates arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after I'd been discharged to die slowly on Maya's couch. I'd ignored the first one in the hospital, too consumed by Edward's betrayal to care about a dead grandmother I hadn't spoken to in 23 years. But this one came certified mail, requiring a signature Maya had to forge because I was too weak to answer the door. She brought it to me with confusion written across her face. It's about Grandmother Josephine. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Throw it away. Angelina, it says, estate. It says you're named as a beneficiary. She's been dead to us for 2 decades. Now she's actually dead. I don't want anything from her. But Maya was already opening the envelope, pulling out heavy cream stationery embossed with gold lettering. She read silently, her eyes widening. You need to see this. The letter was brief, professional, requesting my presence at their downtown offices to discuss significant matters regarding the estate of Josephine Marie Riley, deceased. Sole beneficiary. Urgent attention required. I remembered the day grandmother left. I was 8 years old, standing in our cramped apartment while she and my mother screamed at each other. Words I didn't understand then but pieced together later: disappointment, waste, throwing your life away, ashamed, never forgive you. My mother had married my father, a kind man who worked construction, who loved us fiercely but couldn't give us the life grandmother had envisioned. Working class. Struggling. Unsuitable. Grandmother had walked out that day and never came back. No birthday cards. No Christmas calls. Nothing. When my father died when I was 12, grandmother didn't come to the funeral. When I graduated high school, college, got married, she wasn't there. When my mother died 3 years ago from breast cancer, I checked the funeral home guest book obsessively, hoping. She never showed. I don't want her money, I said, handing the letter back to Maya. At least find out what she wanted. What if it's important? Keisha arrived an hour later with soup and her laptop. You're Googling her, she announced, settling onto the floor beside the couch. Right now. She typed, Josephine Riley Estate. The results loaded and my breath caught. Real estate mogul Josephine Riley dies at 82. Mysterious property empire, no heirs named. Business icon Josephine Riley's $200 million legacy. I stared at the screen. $200 million. That has to be wrong. Keisha clicked through articles. Photos loaded of an elegant black woman in designer suits at charity galas, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, business conferences. Sharp cheekbones. Regal posture. Eyes that looked disturbingly like my own. She built a real estate empire over 50 years, Keisha read. Started with a single property in the 70s, leveraged it, expanded. Owns commercial buildings, residential developments, shopping centers across 3 states. That can't be our grandmother, Maya whispered. Mom said she worked as a secretary. Said she barely had money. But the photos didn't lie. Neither did the articles detailing Josephine Marie Riley's ruthless business acumen, her strategic acquisitions, her reputation as a woman who never forgot a slight and never made the same mistake twice. There's no family mentioned, Keisha noted, scrolling through an obituary. No children, no grandchildren. Just business associates and charitable foundations. She'd erased us as thoroughly from her public life as she'd erased herself from ours. It's probably a scam, I said, my fever making thinking difficult. Or a mistake. Maybe there's another Angelina Riley. Or maybe she left you everything, Keisha countered. Girl, you have $180,000 in medical debt and a husband trying to rob you blind. You can't afford pride right now. She was right. I hated that she was right. The timing is weird though, Maya said softly. She died 2 weeks before you got sick. 2 weeks before Edward canceled your insurance. I hadn't thought about that. Grandmother had died in late August. I'd been admitted to the hospital in early September. If she'd lived another month, would she have known about Edward's betrayal? Would she have cared? That night, I couldn't sleep. I used Maya's phone to search for more information about Josephine Riley. Society pages showed her at museum openings, political fundraisers, corporate events. Always alone. Always composed. Always powerful. In one photo from 2018, she stood at a podium accepting some business award. The caption mentioned her remarkable journey from humble beginnings to real estate empire. Humble beginnings. That was us. The family she'd left behind. Another photo, older, showed her at a groundbreaking ceremony in 2003. I enlarged it, studying her face. She would have been 60 then. I'd been 15, struggling through high school, wearing second-hand clothes, watching my mother work 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Had she known? Had she cared? The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Downtown. The address was in the financial district, the kind of building where people like me didn't belong. I'll drive you, Maya said. We'll figure out what this is about. I agreed, not because I believed there was really an inheritance, but because somewhere in the fever and exhaustion and despair, a small part of me needed to know why. Why she'd left. Why she'd stayed away. Why she'd remembered me now, at the end, when it was too late for anything that mattered. The letter sat on Maya's coffee table, heavy with implications I didn't dare believe in. $200 million couldn't be real. But neither could a husband who tried to kill you, and I'd learned that lesson the hard way. The downtown law office occupied the 42nd floor, all floor-to-ceiling glass and gleaming marble that made Angelina feel small and out of place. She'd borrowed professional clothes from Maya, a navy blazer that hung slightly loose on her still-recovering frame, a cream blouse, gray slacks that had to be cinched tight at the waist. 3 weeks out from the hospital and she still felt fragile, her bones like hollow reeds beneath borrowed fabric. Christopher Henderson rose from behind his desk as she entered, a distinguished black man in his 60s with silver threading through his close-cropped hair. His office overlooked the city, windows framing a vista of steel and glass that stretched toward distant mountains. Ms. Rivers, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. I knew your grandmother well. The warmth in his voice didn't match the formal setting. Angelina shook his hand, confusion already blooming in her chest. She'd never heard anyone speak of Josephine with genuine affection. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, where a thick file folder waited. When he opened it, documents spilled across the polished surface, property deeds, financial accounts, business holdings, columns of numbers that seemed to multiply as she looked at them. Your grandmother built her empire from a small inheritance, Christopher began, his tone matter of fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than appending Angelina's entire understanding of her life. Started with one property 40 years ago, leveraged it, grew methodically. She was brilliant with investments, patient with returns. He spread the documents wider. Names of buildings she recognized from downtown, addresses in neighborhoods she'd never been able to afford, development projects in 3 different states. 67 commercial properties, he continued. 31 residential buildings. 4 active development projects. Total estate value, he paused, meeting her eyes. $200 million. All left to you. The room tilted. Angelina gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles going white. There must be a mistake. Her voice came out thin, reedy. She disowned us. She cut off my mother completely. That's not exactly true. Christopher pulled out another file, thicker than the first. Inside, photographs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, arranged chronologically like a shrine. Angelina at 6, gap-toothed and grinning outside Washington Elementary. At 13, awkward in her middle school uniform. High school graduation, wearing the second-hand gown that had been too long. College commencement at University of Washington, Maya's arm around her shoulders. Her wedding day, and there, barely visible in the back of the church, a figure in black. Her mother's funeral. Josephine standing behind a far tree, watching. She tracked every milestone, Christopher said quietly. Never missed one. He opened a third file. Financial records this time, transactions highlighted in yellow. The scholarship that funded your college education, that was your grandmother. The anonymous donation that paid for your mother's funeral, your grandmother. The grant that covered your mother's medical bills during her final year. Stop. Angelina's hands were shaking. The photographs blurred before her eyes. I don't understand. If she cared, why stay away? Christopher reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a cream envelope, slightly yellowed with age. Her name written across the front in elegant script. She left you a letter, he said. She wanted you to read it here. The envelope was heavy stationery, cream-colored and slightly yellowed with age, sealed with actual wax that had cracked along the edges. Angelina's hands shook as Christopher passed it across the desk. Her name in elegant script, written by a woman she'd never really known. She broke the seal. Inside, 2 pages covered in careful handwriting. My dearest Angelina. If you're reading this, I've run out of time to tell you this in person, a cowardice I'll regret into eternity. I didn't abandon your mother out of shame. I abandoned her to protect everything I'd built, and by extension, to protect you. My siblings tried to destroy what I created. When I refused them control, they sued me, claimed incompetence, tried to prove I was manipulated. I learned that showing love makes you vulnerable. Showing attachment gives people weapons. So I made a choice. I cut everyone off. Became the cold woman in the articles. Let them think I cared only for money. But I watched you. Always. I saw you graduate despite having nothing. I saw you marry a man I knew would hurt you. Yes, I knew about Edward's character. I wanted to see if you could survive without my interference. You're reading this because you survived something terrible. Edward showed his true nature, didn't he? I suspected he would when tested. I knew about his affair 6 months ago. I knew he was preparing to abandon you. I positioned assets strategically. You'll learn I own properties connected to his business interests. Use this fortune to destroy him. Show him what happens when you try to break a wily woman. Never let anyone make you small again. Your grandmother, Josephine. The tears came hot and fast, blurring the ink. Angelina pressed her palm against her mouth, trying to contain the sound that wanted to escape, grief and rage and something like vindication all tangled together until she couldn't breathe. Christopher slid a box of tissues across the desk, his expression carefully neutral. He waited while she composed herself, while she read the letter again, while the full weight of it settled into her bones. The property transfer will take several weeks, he said finally, his tone gentle but businesslike. But there are immediate funds available. $10 million in liquid cash. We can have that transferred within 48 hours. $10 million. Angelina couldn't process the number. It felt fictional. Your grandmother also left strategic holdings. Christopher turned his computer screen toward her, pulled up a property list. I think you should see these. One address jumped out immediately. The building that housed Edward's corporate offices. Another, the yacht club where those photographs were taken, where Edward had kissed Victoria while Angelina lay dying in a hospital bed. 3 more, properties leased by Edward's major clients, the foundation of his business relationships. Your grandmother was very strategic about her acquisitions, Christopher said, and there was something almost like satisfaction in his voice. Angelina stared at the screen. She knew he would do this. She knew his type. Christopher closed the laptop. She investigated him after your wedding. Found discrepancies in his business practices, patterns in his relationships. She couldn't prove anything that would hold up in court, not without revealing herself. So she prepared for any possibility. He paused. Your grandmother spent the last 6 months of her life giving you weapons. Angelina looked down at the letter again, at that elegant handwriting that suddenly felt like armor. Use this fortune to destroy him. For the first time since waking up in that hospital room, she felt something other than weakness. Something sharp and bright and burning. She felt ready. The $10 million appeared in her account within 36 hours. Angelina stared at her phone screen, at numbers that didn't seem real, and made her first decision as a wealthy woman: she would live. The private hospital was nothing like the county facility where she'd nearly died. Her infectious disease specialist, Dr. Patricia Chen, recommended by Christopher's personal physician, took one look at her blood work and admitted her immediately. 2 weeks of aggressive 4-antibiotic treatment, around-the-clock monitoring, meals designed by nutritionists who actually cared whether she survived. This time, intensive care was a choice. She felt her strength return incrementally, like water filling a vessel. The first day she could walk to the bathroom without assistance. The 5th day she could shower standing up. By day 10, the tremor in her hands had stopped. By day 14, Dr. Chen smiled and said, "You're going to be fine." Maya visited every evening, bringing contraband chocolate and gossip from the outside world. "You look like yourself again," she said one night, studying Angelina's face. "Actually, better than yourself. You look dangerous." Angelina read her grandmother's letter so many times she could recite it from memory. Each reading brought new understanding, grief for the relationship they'd never had, yes, but also something unexpected. Gratitude. Josephine had protected her the only way she knew how, from a distance, with money and strategic planning instead of warmth. Christopher visited 3 times a week, bringing files and property documents. She learned the scope of what she'd inherited, the empire Josephine had built brick by brick, acquisition by acquisition. And woven through it all, connections to Edward's business like tripwires waiting to be pulled. Your husband's company leases office space from 3 properties you now own, Christopher explained, spreading documents across her hospital bed tray. His major clients operate from 2 more of your buildings. Your grandmother spent 6 months positioning you, at every pressure point in his professional life. Keisha came once, took one look at the property list, and whispered, "Your grandmother was a fucking genius." They decided immediately, the inheritance would remain secret. Let Edward think she was still broke, still dying, still powerless. Christopher brought Maria Santos to meet her on day 12. The family law attorney was a sharp-eyed Latina woman in her 40s who listened to Angelina's story without interrupting, then said simply, "With your resources, we bury him." The team assembled quickly. Maria for family law. Christopher for estate and property matters. A forensic accountant who specialized in insurance fraud. A private investigator who came recommended by Maria with the warning, "He finds everything." The investigator's first report arrived on day 15, while Angelina was still in the hospital regaining her strength. Edward and Victoria were living together in a downtown condo. The relationship was already strained, arguments about money, about Victoria's spending habits, about Edward's business losses. 3 major clients had dropped him in the past month. Victoria was burning through his savings on designer clothes and spa treatments. But the truly damning information came deeper in the report. Victoria Ashford had a pattern. 3 previous relationships, all with married men whose wives were seriously ill. In 2 cases, she'd waited for the wives to die, positioned herself to benefit from grieving widowers with insurance payouts. "This is attempted murder by financial means," Maria said when they met to review the findings. "He abandoned you to die so he could collect life insurance and start fresh with her." A criminal attorney joined their consultation. Insurance fraud charges were possible. Abandonment of a dependent spouse. Financial elder abuse for the forged power of attorney. They planned the attack methodically, legal divorce with overwhelming evidence. Criminal charges for insurance fraud. Systematic destruction of his business through property leverage and client pressure. Complete annihilation of his reputation in every social and professional circle. By week 3, when Dr. Chen finally discharged her, Angelina walked out of that hospital a different woman than the one who'd entered. Healthy. Strong. Powerful. And absolutely merciless. 3 months after walking out of that hospital, Angelina stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows in her new apartment, 32nd floor, Lakeview, the kind of place she'd once cleaned for other people, and felt like herself for the first time in years. Strong. Clear-headed. Dangerous. The pressure campaign had started small, almost invisible. Client number 1 was a tech company occupying 3 floors in one of her buildings. A shell company, untraceable to Angelina, offered them better lease terms in exchange for switching their cloud services supplier. They dropped Edward's contract within a week. 1 phone call, and his biggest account vanished. Client number 2 fell the same way. Different approach, same result. Edward's office lease came up for renewal. Market rate adjustment, completely legal, bumped his rent by 40%. The yacht club where he'd taken Victoria for champagne and betrayal suddenly put his membership under review for unpaid dues, dues that had mysteriously doubled. Minor obstacles everywhere. Nothing provably connected. Just bad luck, bad timing, bad economy. Christopher called with updates weekly. Thompson Enterprises missed their rent payment, he said during their Wednesday meeting. Banks questioning their loan terms. 3 more clients have expressed concerns about reliability. Edward was bleeding out financially and didn't even know someone had opened the vein. The private investigators' reports painted an increasingly desperate picture. Edward and Victoria fought constantly now, their voices carrying through the walls of their downtown condo. The PI had recording equipment in the adjacent unit, rented through another shell company, naturally. "You said you were wealthy." Victoria's voice, shrill with accusation. "I was. Before the medical bills." The irony was exquisite. Edward blaming debt he'd created by abandoning Angelina to die. The PI discovered Victoria researching other men online. Wealthy divorces. Recent widowers. Her pattern continuing, already looking for her next target while Edward's resources dried up. Angelina's own transformation felt almost surreal. She spent mornings in meetings with property managers, learning the intricacies of her grandmother's empire. The business acumen was there, dormant in her DNA, waiting to be activated. She understood investments, leverage, strategic positioning. She was good at this. Therapy twice a week helped her process the central truth: Edward had tried to kill her. Not with his hands, but with calculated abandonment. He'd cancelled her insurance knowing she'd die. Had walked away knowing she had no resources to survive. Maria Santos met with her every Friday, adding documents to an ever-growing case file. Insurance cancellation during critical illness. Affair evidence. Financial abuse documentation. Medical experts prepared to testify that Edward's abandonment had been life-threatening. The social media exposure started anonymously. Someone, definitely not Angelina, the IP addresses proved it, began posting screenshots of Victoria's luxury purchases with damning context. New Cartier bracelet. Sparkles gemstone, with the caption, paid for with cancelled insurance premiums while his wife died. A photo of diamond earrings, cost $47,000. Edward's wife's medical debt, $180,000. The posts went viral in their social circle within hours. Victoria panicked, deleting everything, but screenshots lived forever. Their friends' group chat exploded. The country club buzzed with whispers. Edward's business associates saw the posts, did the math, started questioning his character. "You're embarrassing us." Edward screamed at Victoria, according to the PI's latest report. "Delete everything. It's already everywhere." Their relationship was imploding exactly as predicted. Victoria had targeted a man she thought was wealthy. Instead, she'd found someone drowning, and she wasn't the type to go down with the ship. Christopher called on a Tuesday afternoon. Thompson Enterprises missed another payment. Banks threatening to call the loan. Angelina stood at her window, looking out over the city her grandmother had conquered brick by brick. Edward's business was failing. His relationship was crumbling. His reputation was in tatters. And he still had no idea who was destroying him. She smiled. 1 week before the divorce hearing, Edward's world collapsed in slow motion, each piece falling with satisfying precision. 3 more clients terminated their contracts within 48 hours of each other. The bank called in his loan, citing irregular business activity and reputational concerns. Thompson Enterprises was facing bankruptcy. Edward, who'd once bragged about his 6-figure income at cocktail parties, was forced to call his parents and beg for money. The PI captured that phone call. Edward's voice, stripped of its usual confidence, pleading with his father for a bridge loan. The shame and rage bleeding through every word. But it was Victoria's departure that truly shattered him. The final fight was spectacular. The PI's recording equipment caught every word, every crash of thrown objects, every slammed door. "You're broke. You're worthless." Victoria's voice, sharp enough to cut glass. "I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but debt and a dying business. I could have stayed with Richard, he actually had money." She'd already found her next target, the PI confirmed. A wealthy divorced executive, freshly single, conveniently vulnerable. Victoria was packing her designer bags, including every piece of jewelry Edward had bought her, while Edward followed her from room to room, begging. "You're pathetic," she said, her cruelty clinical in its precision. "Your wife was right to be glad you're gone." She walked out. Blocked his number. Disappeared into her next conquest's life like she'd never existed in Edward's at all. The PI's surveillance showed Edward alone in that condo, drinking expensive scotch he couldn't afford, calling Victoria's number obsessively, each call going straight to voicemail. His parents learned the truth from a society column, anonymous tip, carefully worded, devastating in its implications. His mother called him immediately. "You did what to your wife?" Her voice, according to Edward's sister, was horrified. "You cancelled her insurance while she was dying." His father's disgust overrode family loyalty. They refused financial help. Moral lines they wouldn't cross, even for their son. Edward's sister reached out through Maria's office. "What he did was monstrous. We didn't know. If you need testimony, I'll provide it." The social circle turned like sharks scenting blood. Anonymous tips reached society reporters, and articles appeared in publications their friends actually read. Prominent businessmen canceled dying wife's insurance to fund affair. Edward's remaining clients vanished overnight. Invitations dried up. People crossed the street to avoid him. The criminal investigation opened quietly. A detective called Maria's office, requesting an interview with Angelina. Insurance fraud charges were being considered. The evidence showed deliberate timing, coordination between Edward and Victoria, possible conspiracy to defraud. Then Edward started calling. First contact in 4 months. His number appearing on her phone like a curse she'd finally learned to break. "We need to talk. This doesn't have to go to court. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. No apology. No accountability. Just fear, naked and desperate." Angelina didn't respond. Let the calls go to voicemail, let them pile up like evidence of his panic. Maria listened to each one, documenting his increasing desperation. Let him panic, Maria said. Tomorrow we show him what real power looks like. The night before the hearing, Angelina drove to the cemetery for the first time since learning the truth. Her grandmother's grave was simple despite the fortune behind it, understated elegance, just like Josephine herself. She brought fresh flowers. Sat on the grass beside the headstone. Thank you for protecting me, she whispered to the evening air. Thank you for teaching me I'm worth fighting for. Thank you for giving me the weapons to survive. The wind moved through the trees, and Angelina felt something like approval, like her grandmother's hand on her shoulder, steady and strong. Tomorrow, she would walk into that courtroom and show Edward what happened when you tried to break a wily woman. Tonight, she was at peace. The courthouse steps felt different this time. 4 months ago, Angelina had climbed these same stairs to file for divorce, weak, broke, desperate. Now she ascended in a tailored Armani suit, navy blue with subtle pinstripes, her legal team flanking her like an honor guard. Maria Santos walked at her right, Christopher Henderson at her left, 3 associate attorneys behind them carrying bankers' boxes full of evidence. Edward was already inside, waiting with his bargain basement attorney near the courtroom doors. He looked destroyed, 20 pounds thinner, graying at the temples, wearing a suit that hung loose on his diminished frame. When he saw Angelina, his mouth opened slightly. No words came out. Just shock, raw and total. How, he finally whispered as she passed. Just that one word, barely audible. How? She didn't answer. Didn't even glance at him. Let him wonder. Judge Patterson was a silver-haired woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency. She called the court to order, surveyed both parties with sharp eyes that missed nothing, Edward's chief attorney shuffling papers nervously, Maria's team calm and organized, Edward himself looking like he might vomit. Edward's attorney stood first, presenting a request for equitable division of assets and minimal spousal support. He attempted to frame Angelina as vindictive, a woman weaponizing the court system against her husband over a regrettable but common marital breakdown. Maria stood. The temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Your Honor, this isn't a marital breakdown. This is attempted murder by financial means. She presented the timeline with surgical precision. Insurance cancellation on March 15, the day after Angelina's sepsis diagnosis. Medical expert testimony explaining that abandonment during critical illness could have been, should have been, fatal. Evidence of the affair, photographs time-stamped during Angelina's hospitalization, Edward and Victoria drinking champagne on a yacht while Angelina fought sepsis in an ICU bed 30 miles away. Financial records showed insurance premiums redirected to Victoria's credit cards. A $47,000 diamond necklace purchased 3 days after the insurance cancellation. Designer handbags. Spa treatments. Yacht club memberships. The PI's video played on the courtroom screen. Edward and Victoria laughing, kissing, toasting their future while Angelina lay dying. Text messages scrolled past, just a few more weeks and we're free. She's not going to make it anyway. Then we can finally start our life together. The forensic accountant testified about deliberate financial abuse, calculated timing, clear intent. Judge Patterson's expression shifted from professional neutrality to barely contained disgust. Edward took the stand. It was a massacre. He was defensive, evasive, utterly without remorse. The medical costs were unreasonable, he said, as if that justified anything. He couldn't explain why he'd cancelled insurance during a life-threatening illness. Couldn't explain the affair's timing. Couldn't explain blocking Angelina's access to joint funds while she was homeless and dying. Maria's cross-examination stripped him bare. By the end, he was stammering, contradicting himself, looking to his attorney for rescue that never came. Then Maria called Edward's father. The older man took the stand with visible reluctance, but his testimony was clear. My son's actions are indefensible. We're horrified by what he did. We support whatever judgment protects Ms. Riley and holds him accountable. Edward's face crumpled. Even his family had abandoned him. Angelina testified last. She was composed, powerful, describing lying in that hospital bed realizing her husband wanted her dead. Fighting sepsis while homeless. Surviving despite systematic abandonment designed to kill her. No tears. Just strength. What do you want from this divorce? Maria asked. Justice, Angelina said clearly. And to make sure he can never do this to anyone else. Judge Patterson called a brief recess. 15 minutes later, she returned with a ruling that would echo through family law circles for years. I've practiced law for 32 years, she began, and this is one of the most disturbing cases I've encountered. Mr. Thompson, you attempted to murder your wife through financial abandonment. You are fortunate this is a civil proceeding. Full divorce granted with prejudice. Edward ordered to pay $180,000 in medical debt, $200,000 in restitution for insurance fraud, $150,000 in Angelina's legal fees, and $500,000 in punitive damages. Referral to criminal court for insurance fraud charges. Referral to the state bar for professional license review. Additional order, Edward prohibited from remarrying for 2 years, until you prove you understand the sanctity of marriage vows. The gavel came down like a guillotine. Edward's face was ash-white, his hands shaking. Over $1 million in judgments against a man facing bankruptcy. Outside, media waited. Someone had tipped them, probably Maria's office. Cameras flashed as Angelina descended the courthouse steps. Ms. Riley, how does it feel? Like justice, she said simply. Like survival. Like power. Edward pushed through the crowd toward her, desperate. Angelina, please. How am I supposed to pay this? She turned, meeting his eyes for the first time. The same way I was supposed to pay $180,000 in medical bills while dying. Figure it out. How did you afford all this? The lawyers, everything. Her smile was cold and sharp. You thought I'd die quietly. That was your mistake. What does that mean? It means you threw away someone with resources you couldn't imagine. She turned away, her legal team surrounding her protectively. Edward stood alone as reporters closed in, shouting questions about attempted murder and insurance fraud. His life in ruins, cameras capturing every moment. Angelina paused at her car, looked back once. You tried to kill me, Edward. Instead, you made me powerful. 3 months later, Angelina sat in her grandmother's former penthouse office, now hers, redecorated with family photos and fresh flowers. She'd expanded the property empire, made strategic acquisitions, proven herself worthy of the Riley name. Edward's business had collapsed completely. Criminal trial pending, facing possible jail time. He was living with his disappointed parents, working minimum wage at a warehouse, every paycheck garnished for the judgment he'd never be able to pay off. Victoria faced her own legal troubles. Edward had sued her for fraud, and investigators were examining her previous relationships, documenting the pattern of targeting vulnerable men with sick wives. But Angelina barely thought about them anymore. She'd created the Josephine Riley Medical Justice Fund, paying medical debt for abandoned spouses, funding insurance for domestic abuse survivors, supporting women fighting financial abuse. The foundation was her grandmother's legacy and her own, intertwined. She visited Josephine's grave every week with fresh flowers. Kept her photograph in the office. Felt the connection growing stronger, understanding deepening. Her grandmother's abandonment had been protection. Distance had been armor. Love expressed through strategic planning rather than warm embraces. Standing at her office window overlooking the city her grandmother had conquered, Angelina touched the glass. 52 properties visible from this vantage point, all part of the empire she now controlled and grew. She looked at Josephine's photograph. Thank you for teaching me I'm worth fighting for. Thank you for showing me that Riley women don't break. She paused, smiling. We build empires. Her reflection in the window showed a woman transformed, healthy, confident, powerful. Everything Edward tried to destroy, now flourishing beyond his wildest nightmares. You tried to kill me, she thought. Instead, you showed me who I really am. My grandmother gave me an empire. My husband tried to take my life. I chose to take everything else instead. Because that's what Riley women do. We don't die quietly. We rise powerfully. And we never, ever forgive those who tried to bury us.